Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultured Pull List, hosted by yours truly, Mike, and my co-host, Luke. Now, Luke, what are we going to be talking about today?
In today's episode, we'll be talking about the last four issues of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
Very cool. We covered the first four last episode, and yeah, we did get this. I think we read this on the trade paperback version, basically, but these were released originally as an 8-part single issue comic series. So, well, not single issue, but eight issues of uh, comics. So,
Yeah.
anyway, let's hop right into this. Alrighty. So, for those of you who are not familiar with if you didn't watch our episode last week, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow was a series that came out in 2021 and 2022, I believe, through
Mhm.
like August through April. And yeah, so we covered the first half last episode because apparently this is what the new Supergirl movie is going to be based off of, according to James
Yeah.
Gunn. So we fit in these issues, like James Gunn mentioned a few different comics that
Mhm.
they're basing the new DC properties on, and they're selling like hotcakes, like all over the
Mhm.
internet and everything. So we decided to kind of cover these one by one. So we're starting with Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow.
Yep.
So the author of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is Tom King. Artist is Bilquis Evely. Colorist or inker is Matthias Lopez. Oh, no, sorry. The colorist is Matthias Lopez. The inker is Clayton Cowles. There we go. And it was released as issues, single comic issues from August 2021 through April 2022. And then I'm pretty sure released as a trade paperback July 2022.
Mm.
And that is available. I'm not sure if you can still find, probably somewhere, but I don't know. I'm not sure if you can still find the comic issues themselves, the separate issues, but you can definitely find the trade paperback a
Yeah.
lot of places, like on Amazon or wherever.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's just jump right into this. We're starting with issue 5 and then going to the end to issue 8. So starting with issue 5. So this issue starts out where we left off, pretty much. Ruthie and Supergirl are still looking for Krem. They're kind of hot on his trail, kind of following his trail of destruction. Apparently, he has a trick up his sleeve, something called I think a Mordru orb, which is basically
Mhm.
this magic orb that is really hard to make because apparently you need to kill like an insane amount of people. Um,
Yeah. So they said
to
it's not hard to make, but it's hard to like the
Right.
actual idea, the ritual or whatever of making it's very simple. But before you do that, you have to kill like 1,000
Yes.
people or whatever.
And I'm pretty sure you have to kill them like basically for the sole purpose of making the orb.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's what they said. So like that's also why it's difficult. You basically kind of have to go on a killing spree,
Right.
which Krem had been doing.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
whipped this out and threw it at Supergirl and Ruthie
Mhm.
and teleported them to a completely different planet with a bunch of monsters roaming around. But the sun was green.
Yeah.
And apparently, Supergirl explains to Ruthie that this planet was basically made by Superman's enemies. It doesn't really specify who, and it was
Mhm.
basically made to be a trap slash like torture planet for Superman. So the sun itself is made out of kryptonite,
Yeah.
and there's all these monsters there to basically kill him once he is weakened. And apparently he had been on this planet before and lasted like 45 minutes. He tried to outlast and just like wait for sunset,
Mhm.
but then the Justice League came and rescued him. But at this point, Supergirl's only recourse is to wait 9 hours for the sun to set. And
Right.
she's basically going to be like dying that whole time.
Mhm.
So, so she and Ruthie just find these like outcropping of rock and they just kind of hang out. Supergirl walks as far as she can, and then she just collapses because she can't go any further. And she kind of goes in and out of consciousness and screams of agony for a long time, while Ruthie is left to defend her and kill whatever monsters come by, which some do. And she has to use the blade she pulled out of her father out of her father's chest, which she's been carrying this whole time.
Right.
She does actually use that to kill one of the monsters. But then the second time monsters show up, they're like these weird pterodactyl things. She hadn't cleaned the blade handle, the sword handle, so it slips out of her hand. She can't get a good grip on it. She almost gets taken out, but Supergirl wakes up from her stupor long enough just to laser the pterodactyl creature, basically, and saves Ruthie. So Ruthie vows that she's going to actually clean the handle and not, be caught unawares again. And this goes on. They obviously have to wait, the 9 hours. At one point, Supergirl tries to go to this lake, pretty much in the smack in the center of this planet or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure if they say it's an actual planet, but I think it is. But it's probably a pretty small one. But there's this lake in the middle, a bunch of vegetation, but it's basically designed to attract all the monsters there. So if you go there for water, you're going to get attacked by like all the monsters. So Supergirl tries to go to get some water because she's really suffering, but Ruthie has to stop her, and Supergirl is weak enough that she really can't, fight Ruthie that much. So she ends up just accepting and laying back down. And it's just about sunset when this big old sucker shows up and looks hungry. So Ruthie tries to fight him off, but she's not doing the greatest job because he's huge and she's tiny, and she's just kind of praying that the sun will go down so Supergirl will get her power back. And luckily, at the last second, the sun goes down enough that Supergirl gets enough of her powers back that she's able to stop this monster. And she even basically calls Superman a bitch in the process because like she said, like 45 minutes, like he only lasts 45 minutes. What a little bitch. It's a pretty funny scene, but that's pretty much all that happens in this. At the end, the sun goes down completely. Supergirl has her powers back, and she and Ruthie fly away from that horrible planet. Now, let's see. Now, the next issue, we finally get to see Supergirl's origin, which going into this, I knew was going to be a little different from previous incarnations, previous whatever you want to call it, previous continuity. It's like there have been a lot of versions. I'm thinking of Injustice, mainly Injustice 2. Like there are a lot of versions like that where she sees a lot more of Krypton being destroyed than Cal would because he was just a baby. So she, in most continuity, she kind of has more trauma than Cal because she was old enough to remember everything that was going on pretty much. But in this, we really get to see that like tenfold because she was in class just doing normal teenager stuff, and then Krypton just like exploded, and she was just, most of the buildings were in rubble. She was just like, she basically had to witness Krypton be destroyed and pretty much everybody she knows die, pretty much, at least the people caught in the explosion. But she and a handful of people survived when Krypton exploded because apparently Argo City, where she lived, like there's this, a big chunk of Krypton kind of got blown away from the rest of the planet during the explosion. And it seems like most of, if not all of Argo City, like survived. But it's just kind of like floating out in space. It's just pretty much just like a space rock floating. And yeah, so they managed to survive. The Kryptonians in Argo City that survived the blast are able to survive for a while. But Kara's mother gets really sick, and she does not last long after getting sick and ends up dying. And Kara's father, who is, for those of you who don't know, Zor-El, he is Jor-El's brother. He's also a scientist. He's also very brilliant, and he's like the one that's helping keep Argo City alive. He figures out that his wife, Kara's mother, died from radiation poisoning, and he puts two and two together. And apparently the yellow suns that they've been like passing when they're floating around in space have turned Krypton radioactive. So they're basically standing on radioactive material. It's like, for those of us who know, it seems like it turned it into kryptonite. So they're basically just standing. There's a bunch of Kryptonians just like living on a hunk of kryptonite, which is obviously not good for them. So his plan, that's later. His plan is to basically mass produce a bunch of lead shielding, put that on the ground and attach it. And it, like, pretty much all the Kryptonians had to pitch in, and it took like a month, I think, for that to work. And Kara just kind of like worked tirelessly. There was this one scene where she kept going for like 2 days straight, pretty much, while everybody else like had stopped at that point. And she was just relentless with it. But finally, like, everyone who survived, was thriving for like a year with that lead shielding underneath them. But then a good old space debris storm decides to just kind of wreak havoc and to destroy pretty much all the lead shielding beneath them. Which, yeah, not great. So it pretty much doomed everybody in Argo City except for Kara, because Kara's father had apparently gotten the plans for the spaceship that his brother Jor-El had made for Kal-El, Superman, and he rebuilt it. But it was only, still only enough for one person. But he decided to save his daughter, much like Jor-El did with Superman. And yeah, that is pretty much that for this part of it. This story kind of intertwined both Kara's backstory and what was going on at the time. Kind of combine them together, like kind of went back and forth, even within like the same page, which worked okay for the comic, but I felt like it'd just be kind of confusing to do that here. So I just decided to tackle one at a time. So now to like the actual current events. Supergirl and Ruthie track Krem to whatever planet this is. Krem and the Brigands are in the middle of killing another planet, and just as they're about to kill this citizen, Supergirl shows up and starts kicking ass, and Krem whips out another orb, another Mordru globe. Sorry, apparently globe is the proper term, and he throws it at her again, but Supergirl's actually prepared this time. She starts to outrun it, which Krem is like, "What are you, stupid? You can't outrun it." But she knows this. She manages to run to the outskirts of wherever they were, whatever city they were at, and Comet the Super Horse was waiting for her. It just kind of like came out of nowhere, but apparently, like, this character Comet's been around since the '60s, and it's just been kind of like a staple of Supergirl. At least one of her, there's so many super pets. There's even like a super monkey, but but apparently, and like Comet's backstory is really weird. It's actually like a dude or something, but you'll see that later.
We'll get into it.
yeah, we'll get into that. But what I found really cool was just the freaking imagery, like the art. So like Comet and Supergirl basically just lead this globe all around the cosmos, just going like probably faster than the speed of light, going insanely fast. But there's just so much cool imagery, like just these huge, like almost full page spreads. Is really, really nice. And like there's a lot of Ruthie's narration going on in the background, which is like, honestly, I feel like in this scene it's a little bit white noise. Kind of doesn't add much, really. Like, all you really need are these visuals because they're just so cool. But yeah, they even like go across like this sun, super cool. But eventually they lead the globe. I'm not really sure where exactly. They aren't really clear. It's kind of like a void. This black and this colorless void. It's not really clear whether it's like the end of time and space, or like, I kind of thought it was the Phantom Zone at first, but I don't think it is.
I don't think so either.
But the globe, basically, I guess magic doesn't really have power there for whatever reason, and she's able to just like tap the globe and it just falls to the ground. So then they return. Supergirl and Ruthie return to that planet, and it takes a long time to make one of those globes. So Kara isn't worried at all that Krem made another one. And she's able to easily overpower him because all he has is like arrows and swords, and she's, like you see at the bottom of this page, she just snaps the arrow in half. And that is the end of issue 6. You want to take over from here?
All right, so issue 7 begins with Ruthie's narration saying that she wasn't present for the next part, so she's kind of just taking it from other sources. She said that there's a lot of like poems and stuff based on what happened, and also they end up naming like a beach after her after this battle or whatever. And so so we get this. Supergirl's confronting the ship. We get this, and then it cuts to Ruthie picking apples with Comet.
Oh yeah.
They have captured Krem, and the rest of the pirates are on their way. Krem is tied to a tree, and the horse is like standing between Ruthie and Krem. The horse won't let her kill him. And then there's this right as Supergirl starts fighting, there's this very meta kind of comment in the narration where it says, super people are very powerful, and we all know how this fight's going to end, so then what's the point?
Oh, yeah.
And so then, so I was like, that's fine. But then right after that, she continues saying, she contradicts herself by asking the question of what's the point is a foolish question. And it's like, well, then why? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then Ruthie and Krem are talking, and they basically, this might come later, but basically their conversation is they start talking about her father, and then like how like Krem's job was basically just to go to different places and see who was loyal to the king. So he would like tell them jokes and see who would laugh, and then he would kill the people who would laugh because therefore they're unloyal. Right. But Ruthie's father didn't laugh. Instead, he was like overly loyal, and he's like, "Why would you even joke about the king like that?" And so Krem was insulted, so he killed him anyway. Okay, yeah, and then so this is the part where Supergirl, she's fighting, and then she gets hit by a cannonball, and so she's kind of falling down to the atmosphere. But then like the heat of the atmosphere reminds her of Krypton, and then she gets this kind of not a flashback, but she sort of remembers this time when her father almost burnt the house down, and she's like, "Don't tell your mom."
Oh yeah.
But then like everyone's dead, and so like if she dies here, then that story will die too. So she's like, I want to keep fighting. Yeah. So this is the part where the ship is out of Cannonball. So Supergirl kind of takes advantage of that, and she starts fighting them. This is the part where the flashback happens that I talked about earlier. And then Krem's basically like, yeah, I don't really, he's kind of just hanging out because he thinks that like Supergirl wouldn't kill him anyway. So she's like, so he's basically like, the quote is, should odds defy them being the pirates, and they falter in their mission, I'll be left to the gentle and kind care of the ever-forgiving Supergirl of Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this at the end of the issue, the pirates kind of have her tied up with like kryptonite rope. And it seems like she's begging for her life, but really she's begging the horse not to come up and kill them all.
Yeah.
And then,
which is more like she doesn't want Comet to leave Ruthie, right? Because she doesn't trust Ruthie to not kill Krem while she's gone.
Ruthie's like, no, you got to go save Supergirl. We're good here. I'm not going to kill him. And then the issue ends with like saying, I wouldn't recommend lying to a horse, but I just did it anyway.
Yeah. Basically, and like I'll feel bad for a bit, but you know it's worth it.
Right, exactly. And then issue 8 is mostly just action, so my notes I don't have a whole lot of notes here.
Sure.
But it begins with Ruthie unties Krem, and then Comet goes and saves Supergirl.
Yeah.
But then he this picture's really cool. There's like neon stuff going on. But then he's like turns into a guy, and then as he's dying, he like turns into a dude. And I was like, is Supergirl remembering her father in this moment? Like what's going on here?
Nope, it's Comet.
Comet is like a guy and a horse or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
comics are weird.
Trying not to think about it too hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like this moment, and then also the bit with the Kryptonite sun, it kind of seems like Tom King and maybe some of the artists are kind of like pulling from obscure older comics to kind of influence this. And I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, me too. Like I didn't really know anything about them, but when I looked them up, I'm like, there's a lot of history here. Like it's not really well known, but it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So comic turns into a guy. Supergirl breaks free, and then Ruthie and Krem start a fair fight. And so it seems like the way it's setting up that Krem is going to kind of take advantage of the situation. But then Ruthie doesn't play fair, so as Krem's grabbing for the sword, she basically hits him in the face and starts biting him.
I kind of liked that because it's like instead of just like because he leaped for the sword and she instead of leaping for the sword, she waits for him to like give up his footing and like kind of be like in a dive, and she just starts like kicking him in the face, you know, pretty much. Yeah, it's pretty fun. In a violent way.
Yeah, exactly. And then so then in the chaos, she grabs a sword and she cuts his hand off.
Yes,
which she started. Yeah, what were you saying?
No, when I was reading that, because in the previous panel you see him reaching for her, and I was just like, "Girl, just turn around and cut his arm off." And then she pretty much does that. I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." There we go.
Yeah, and then so she starts monologuing, kind of preparing herself to kill him, but she can't bring herself to do it.
Right.
And then so Supergirl shows up and she's like, "Yeah, by the way, Crypto's fine. I just kind of lied to you."
Right, because the whole thing, like, if you hadn't watched our last episode, Supergirl basically needed Krem because he shot Crypto,
right?
And she told Ruthie that there was Hunter's poison on the arrow that Krem shot Crypto with, and they couldn't help Crypto unless they got basically the recipe for the poison,
right?
The chemical makeup of the poison from Krem. So that's why Supergirl needed Krem alive. But now she just like, JK, LOL, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Supergirl, it looks like Supergirl's gonna kill Krem, but then there's like a flashback to all of the events that happened before in this story, and then Ruthie convinces her not to kill Krem, and so then we flash forward to some point in the distant future where old Ruthie is telling the story. This is after she wrote everything down and she kind of got it published, I guess. And then like Supergirl's like, "Oh, I read your book," and they're like, "Yeah, it's mostly fiction, but whatever."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I really like this new suit. I kind of prefer the pants over the skirt.
Me too.
Yeah.
The skirt's like fine, I guess.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It just feels kind of outdated. Like I definitely prefer this look, which is kind of like what they had in like the last few seasons of Supergirl, the CW show, which I liked. I liked that they actually changed the suit. It looked pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely like this look.
Yeah, and it looks a lot like the suit that Sasha Calle is going to have.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
And so then they're like, Ruthie, like I mentioned, Ruthie said that a lot of it was made up, and so that kind of throws the whole story into question, like,
right? It's like what's made up and what's not.
Right.
I mean, they're pretty clear about the end. Because they mention like they show you the real ending, and then like the narration tells the fake ending, basically.
Yeah. And then they kind of go to the Phantom. Well, they don't go to the Phantom Zone. They kind of pull Krem out of the Phantom Zone. And then he basically is like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And then Ruthie kills him, and that's
yeah, I was not expecting that, because like they with the narration or something, they were saying that he had been in the Phantom Zone for like years and years and years, and I guess like had to like deal with all his guilt for all those years. And so he basically was reformed, and so they brought him out, and he's like, I'm so like, because this whole time he was unrepentant, like completely. And then he goes to Ruthie, who's an old lady now, and is like, "Please forgive me. Oh, I feel so awful. This is all I'm a changed man." And she just takes her cane, goes, and it's like he hits him on the head and kills him. Like, oh, okay, all right. They just kind of, and that's how it ends. Yeah, so that was interesting. So what were your overall thoughts about this? We talked a little bit about the last episode, but now that we've finished it, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely prefer the last issues before the first ones. I feel like it was just not a lot. There wasn't not necessarily a setup, but there was just a lot of like exposition in the first couple issues. And then this
not a lot happened.
Yeah, exactly. And this one, there's more action and then less narration, and I feel like that helps it a lot.
Yeah, I feel like the narration sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Like I mentioned earlier, like that one scene where Comet and Supergirl are being chased by that globe. It feels very much just like, like it doesn't need to be there, and it's kind of distracting from the really cool art or like what's happening. Plus, I feel like it sort of feels like a crutch sometimes. Like instead of just showing the story, like comics are kind of supposed to do for the most part, it just kind of over explains things. But like I don't hate the concept of the narration. I just feel like it's overdone a bit, and I feel like it works better. It would work really well if it were like a novel. But since this is a comic book, the mediums are pretty different. So it just doesn't work all the time. But I kind of enjoy that it's from Ruthie's perspective, because even though it's a Supergirl comic, it kind of lends like more of a uniqueness to it. So I like that. And what I like about this story is it really makes Supergirl a unique character. It makes her interesting. Plus, I feel like there's a lot of different versions of Supergirl where they really try hard to be like, she's better than Superman, but it just doesn't work. Like, say, like the CW version, they like try really hard to be like, well, she's naturally stronger than Superman or whatever, but it doesn't really ring true. It just feels like it's a shallow attempt at like, rah feminism or whatever. Whereas this story kind of gives some actual reasons like as to why maybe she is stronger than Superman in some respects. She has had to go through more hardships. And so it's made her like, it has made her a bit jaded, but she's also just kind of stronger and able to kind of handle more stuff emotionally, seems like. And she's not as shocked at evil in the world because she's seen so much messed up stuff. It doesn't surprise her that people would do messed up things or awful things would happen. Plus they just kind of showed her just able to endure so much, like when she was on that planet, that kryptonite planet, for nine months. Months, what the heck, 9 hours. 9 months would be insane. No, 9 hours. They even gonna have that thing where she's like, really, Cal couldn't even last 45 minutes. They're just stuff like that where it's believable that she has some strengths that Superman doesn't have, which I thought was cool, and just overall really kind of made her stand out as her own character, like I said. And it's just kind of a sci-fi adventure. I thought that was fun. It was like a quest, It was like a medieval sci-fi fusion kind of adventure, which I thought was really cool. And the art was awesome. The art was super good.
Absolutely. I mean, it's worth reading for the art alone, I would say.
Absolutely. And we didn't like cover everything. Like, obviously, like I wouldn't say because you've watched this, you shouldn't read it. Like, absolutely read it. There's plenty of stuff we glossed over. And like Luke said, the art itself is really good. So that was fun. I really feel like, I really wasn't that interested in reading this per se. Like I was going to at some point, when James Gunn mentioned it, but now that we've read it, I'm glad we have, because it was definitely fun, and definitely kept me intrigued. But I do feel like it's gonna translate well into a movie, because I feel like it would honestly be better in a more concise sort of medium, as opposed to the 8 issues. I feel like there wasn't necessarily enough story for the whole 8 issues. They definitely could have shortened the first 4 into like 1.5, 2,
Yeah, and I feel like this is a really good story to pick for an introduction movie. It kind of reminds me of like the Batman, how like it's not an origin story, but it does help inform a lot of who this character is as a person. Instead of like going through beat by beat their origin, is kind of like telling you who they are without like actually showing you how they got there, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that really does seem what James Gunn wants to do with this universe, is not necessarily start from square one for every character. Even the Superman movie isn't going to be an origin story. So I think they definitely could like introduce Supergirl in like one of the Superman movies, or even maybe like that Green Lantern show would actually kind of work. And then in her movie, people would know who she is, but they don't actually delve into her origins except like in those flashbacks, maybe. So I think that like you said, it's going to be a really cool like first solo movie for her, I think. And I've heard like they really haven't decided whether they're going to carry over Sasha. It's Kelly or Kaye.
I've always said Kaye, but I don't know if that's right.
I'm pretty sure it's Kaye because it is a Spanish name. So so I'm like, from what I heard, they aren't sure yet. They're kind of waiting to see how well the Flash does and how well her version of Supergirl is accepted. Though It seems like she is like an alternate universe version, so it could work either way, whether they recast her or not.
Right.
But I really don't think the appearance is going to matter that much. I think what's going to matter is if she can pull this off, which she already seems like a more jaded Supergirl just from like the Flash trailer we saw. Right. So I think I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm very curious to see whether they're just going to start fresh or they're going to try and kind of pull her over from, the Flash into this.
Right.
But yeah, that is the end of our summary and review of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Before we wrap up this episode, we're going to do a segment called our Cultured Picks. Luke, you had Thunderbolts, right?
Yeah, I had the Thunderbolts #1. So this was it was actually announced before the movie was, but I think it was supposed to come out in like March, but for whatever reason it got delayed a whole bunch, and the first issue came out in August. And honestly, this lineup is quite a bit better than the one they announced for the movie.
Yeah, I mean, honestly.
So it's Hawkeye. There's Monica Rambeau.
Yeah.
America Chavez. I think that's Luke Cage. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've actually read it, but I remember really liking it.
Yeah, that looks like Power Man.
There's a couple of new characters as well. But I just really liked the tone of this story. It was really kind of just like a fun action romp that didn't take itself too seriously. And I've had an issue with a lot of recent Marvel comics. It just feels like they're dropping the ball because, like, oh well, we could just rely on the movies and no one really cares about the comics. But this one specifically, it was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
That is something I think is kind of unique about what James Gunn is trying to do. Is he's simultaneously like building up the movies and live action content and animated content as well as the comics. Like he's basing, a lot of these movies and shows specifically on comics.
Right.
So people will want to read the comic to understand what's going on, or at least, be introduced to the story, the general outline. Right. And even at the end of the Flash trailer, it said like, read the comics that, inspire this. We have like for the first volume of New 52 Flashpoint, and the prequel comic, the 3-issue prequel comic for the Flash movie. So I feel like DC is trying to garner more interest in the comics, not just the movies and shows, which I do think Marvel should do more of. I think the only one they really seem to put any effort into lately is probably like Spider-Man. And even that is like a little up and down. Like they literally gave him a glider in some of the more recent ones. I'm like, huh? And he's working for Norman Osborn, which I don't hate. It's maybe an interesting way to go.
I think that Norman Osborn is kind of being a good guy, at least momentarily.
Yes. And he's going like the Golden Goblin.
The Golden Goblin. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's that part's actually interesting, but I don't like all of the stuff all of the gadgets he gave Spider-Man. It's a little weird. Right. Like I think he gave him like a glider and like pumpkin bombs basically, but they're like spider bombs. And I'm like, what? Like that's a weird way to go. But anyway, time for my cultured pick for this week is Batman Spawn #1. Now this is like this is a one-shot comic, so it's not a series. So I would definitely suggest picking this up. It's like $5 or $6, and it's just a really cool one-off story. Even though there have been Batman and Spawn crossovers in the past, this one like kind of just ignores those exist and just starts over, so you really don't have to read the other ones. All you really need to know is that Batman and Spawn exist. That's pretty much it. And I did pick up this variant. There's a bunch of different variants from different artists. This one is by H. Jason Fabok, which is Fabok, I don't know. And it's pretty cool. I kind of want to get the Jim Lee one, but anyway, they're probably still in comic shops because this only came out a couple months ago, I think in December. So definitely check this out. But it almost feels like an Elseworld story where like. I'm not gonna delve too much into it, but basically Spawn kind of gets transported to Gotham, and he's looking for the person that killed his wife, I think. And he seems to think it's Batman, but then the Court of Owls is involved, and it's pretty interesting. And there's even like they kind of have like ways of like sneaky ways of diminishing Spawn's powers by having like magic dead zones or something.
Okay.
So like at first, Spawn is beating the crap out of Batman, but then Batman manages to like crawl away to like this one area that's a dead zone. So Spawn's basically just normal. So then Batman like jumps up and starts beating the crap out of him. So there's like a bit of a fight between them until they team up and fight the Court of Owls, and it's pretty interesting. There's like it seems like there's like a multiversal like council of the Court of Owls. Basically, it's not just on yeah. So it's kind of interesting. Like they don't like show it, but they mention it in like Spawn's universe. I guess the Image universe has their own Court of Owls and stuff. It's pretty interesting, and it's written by Todd McFarlane, the creator of Spawn. So and he's worked on Batman a lot too over the years.
Yeah.
So it's a very fun story. It's not connected to anything else, which is a nice change. Like almost everything else is like, oh well, you have to read these 8 issues to understand this, So yeah, I would definitely pick that up if you are into collecting comics. Which, if you're watching this, I would think maybe you are. But yeah, that is the conclusion of our show. This has been the Cultured Pull List. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching or listening if you're listening to the audio. Thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe. If you want to check out the Cultured Nerds socials and website and you're watching this at home, go ahead and use the QR code on the bottom left. If you want to check out Casual Experts, which is Luke and my brand, however you would say that, and English is hard sometimes. Go ahead and check out the QR code on the bottom right for our socials and our YouTube channel and our Casual Experts Only podcast. And if you would like to support the Cultured Nerd on Patreon to help keep us bringing you more content, check us out at patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show's tier if you would like to support us and our show specifically. Thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters. I have been your host, Michael Malillo, and my co-host is Luke S. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We will see you next week.
Peace.